Hello! In this video, we'll look at enhancements made to the Subject Calibration panel, which help you achieve higher levels of accuracy and confidence in your data. Subject Calibration Feedback has been part of Shōgun since its very first release, and displays information on your subject's calibration, which includes if any markers are missing from the specified marker set, the calibration status, and if any labeling clusters have been attached to the subject. While booting the skeleton, the Subject Calibration Feedback also displays a list of the joint angles that have been rejected so far, which helps the performer find a better A pose. All the features listed so far have been collected into a single place, called the Subject Calibration Feedback panel. This panel now also includes a list of joints associated with the chosen template, and the joint's range of motion that's been captured so far, with a progress bar indicating the joint coverage. Use these progress bars to guide the performer towards getting better coverage. Now, we've used the word coverage a few times so far in this video, so here's a quick definition as to what the word means in the context of subject calibration. Each joint in a template has a set of statistics that determine how the joint can perform, such as how far a joint can stretch or the angles at which it can bend. A joint's range of motion is measured in terms of coverage, which refers to how well the performer's range of motion matches, in other words, covers the corresponding joint statistics. The progress bar is red if a joint's coverage is below 30%. Now, coverage under this threshold means the skeleton's calibration is more strongly influenced by the predefined statistics of the joint compared to the recorded range of motion of the performer. This is to compensate for the lack of varied data. Now, there's nothing explicitly wrong with low coverage on certain joints, and in some cases it's completely understandable. For example, coverage cannot be achieved on a certain joint due to limitations imposed by a costume. Our system is sophisticated enough to compensate for this as well as it can, but in general, coverage under 30% does not produce optimal calibrations. For good coverage, aim for between 30 to 60%. Once 30% is reached, the bar will turn green and a tick will appear on the right side of the panel. Joints that achieve at least 30% coverage will perform much better than those beneath it, and we encourage you to reach at least 30% on as many joints as possible. When joint coverage reaches 60%, the green tick is replaced with a star. Now, you're welcome to perform additional range of motions at this point, but at 60% coverage for a joint, you have already achieved optimal results, so further motion isn't necessary. Like previous releases, when you're happy with the level of coverage for your subject, click Stop Calibration in the tracking panel. In earlier versions of Shōgun, performers had to rely on their intuition and observations of the resulting skeleton to determine the success of the calibration. This meant that performers had to complete their range of motions before finding out if changes were required, as there was no way of knowing which joints required better coverage. By reviewing these progress bars during the calibration, you get real-time feedback on which joints are getting better coverage and which joints require more. You can then improve your calibration by directing the performer accordingly to collect more coverage on certain joints. The overall coverage is displayed as an average at the top of the Subject Calibration Feedback panel. While this is useful to get an overall sense of how much coverage has been achieved, we generally recommend reviewing the individual progress bars, just to check it isn't being skewed by especially high or significantly low coverage on a particular joint. Just a heads up, coverage for toes is often low, and usually caused by toe markers being placed on shoes, resulting in limited dexterity. If you can't get above 30% coverage on these joints, the predetermined statistics for the joints will then contribute more significantly to your subject's overall calibration. To get toe coverage above 30%, try using different shoes, perhaps even socks, or something that has better dexterity. You can determine if certain footwear is appropriate for motion capture by asking the performer to keep their toes on the floor and then raising their heels. If you can see this action in the toe bone of the labeling skeleton, you've got the right footwear. As mentioned previously, it's best practice to get at least 30% coverage for all joints if possible. If you want to focus on just the joints that need additional coverage, untick the Show Sufficiently Covered field in the panel to hide the joints that have enough coverage. You're then given a list of the joints that need more attention. For more information on calibrating your subject, see the video description for a link to the relevant Shōgun documentation. Thank you for watching.